Alright, we are about to dive into the arena. If you haven't seen the arena before, as a difference to regular Hearthstone, it's sort of like draft play in Magic or in other card games where you just take a pool of random cards, you get to choose one of 3 of them, you make a deck of 30 cards, and you go nuts against other opponents with the same conditions. I've already chosen to be a Shaman. I had the choice between that and a Priest and a Rogue, and I don't really like Rogue. Especially not without Constructed. I like playing the Gadgetzin deck in Rogue, but in the random stuff, not a big fan. I have already done a run with Shaman once in the arena, despite my earlier disdain for it, and while I don't really like it in Constructed play, here I managed to get 8 wins with it on what was a pretty fortunate draft, because I'm not very skilled, but by far the best I've ever done in arena. So of course I wasn't recording it, I was just playing it late one night when I got off of work. So, here we go. Early on, we're just looking to take the best cards. Later on, we'll try and fill out our curve, make sure our removal's looking good, our creature ratio's looking good, that kind of stuff. And on this first pick, Sunwalker's pretty great, and these other 2 choices are eh. Especially in Arena, where there's going to be a lot less silence, a lot less removal. Taking a Sunwalker, not really regretting it. So we're hoping to see a lot of rares, and there's always like a sound effect that accompanies them, and, you know, all sorts of fun stuff. But our goal each time is basically, okay, we're going to try and make the best pick for what we're working with, which includes, you know, our hero power and what's going on with all that. None of these 3 choices are spectacular. In fact, all of them are pretty much mediocre. We're going to take the Youthful Brewmaster here because he's a 3-2 for 2. If we're playing in turn 2, we don't care about his effect. And in some spots, whether it's another monster with Battle Cry or a really injured minion that we can put back and resummon, that effect can be useful for us. It can also be detrimental, but we have the control of where, you know, when we play it. So it's not a big deal. We don't got to worry about it. See, I'm not taking the Lord of the Arena here. The Lord of the Arena is mediocre at best. Anytime you have a Taunter with less health than mana, I don't think you're on the right track. Bloodlust is interesting. It's very expensive, but you can use it to clear out either a huge amount of the board or to sweep for the victory. But for 5 mana, I mean, boy, that's... I think we got to take the Silverhand Knight here, especially because we're essentially getting 6/6 worth of value for 5 mana. And it's split so that it can't be targeted by 1 removal spell. This is almost always going to be Earthring Farseer. The Wolf Rider's not bad. You can use him as pseudo-removal. Take his 3 attack, ram it into something. But I happen to like a little bit of healing. 3/3 for 3 is great. The healing is just an added bonus. And the Stone Skin Gargoyle has never impressed me. It's annoying, but it never does anything huge. This is an interesting choice because the Acolyte of Pain does give us some potential card draw. I'm not sure it's a great turn 3 play for this deck, especially because we're looking at overload issues where mana may be hard to come by. We want our mana plays to be as effective and as impactful as possible. And then that Unbound Elemental, already not bad for 3, and if we can get off 1 spell with overload, like a Lightning Bolt for 1 mana, all of a sudden it becomes very, very valuable, so I think we're going to go with that. Alright, we got Shimmery Noises because that's a rare. So Lava Burst is solid if unspectacular. The Defender of Argus, always good as long as you can give him the minion support that you need. Giving out 2+1/+1s and Taunt essentially makes him a 4/5. And the Young Priestess certainly not happening. So I got to decide. We have no spells in this deck yet. It's a little too early to be worried about that, but it's still interesting. Lava Burst also a good closeout card. Being able to do 5 damage to the face that your opponent can't really do anything about is handy. But because of the minion build and the fact that we have some strong minions, I think we're going to be looking at the Defender of Argus here. We'll hope to see a Lava Burst later, especially with some bad alternatives. This is 100% Lightning Bolt. I don't mind the silence aspect of Earthshock, but beyond that, it's not very good. And again, we don't mind the overload cost, especially now that we already drafted at least 1 Unbound Elemental. And the Web Lord is useless to us. So let's take a Lightning Bolt, especially because we like the spells. This... not the simplest choice, but it's almost always Hex. The Ascension Shieldmaster is pretty solid. 5 health, 4 taunt, or 4 mana rather, for taunt. But Hex, too good. It's our individual removal. It's almost better than Polymorph for the Mage. Yes, it puts out a taunter that would kind of blocks our damage sometimes, but still. The ability to say, you are not a threat, too good. In my run that I had 8 wins on, I had 3 hexes in my deck. I loved each and every one of them. Here, we're not really concerned about spell damage +1, and the Dust Devil, it can be annoying, but I just think it loses too many early trades. And the overload cost means if you play that turn 1, you're not playing anything turn 2. So let's take another Earthen Ring. Okay. The Bright Shimmeries here. Farsight is interesting. I actually don't know if I've seen that card before. The Mountain Giant, self-explanatory. And Shade of Naxxramas almost always sets up valuable trades. Huh. Kind of wish I had better choices for what is a good draw. Mountain Giant, I just can't see. We're not going to have a ton of cards in hand. We're going to have about average. We're not playing like a Warlock or something that can really exploit that. Shade of Naxxramas can become quite the pest. And Farsight, I mean, it essentially pays for itself, right? And if we draw into one of our minions, that can be good. We obviously have to be careful about when we play that. Somewhere around like turn 6 is going to be ideal for that card. Because that way, if we draw a 3-mana minion, we can just play it. If we draw a 6-mana minion, we'll still have enough to play it. We don't want to waste the second part of its effect, because just drawing a card for 3 mana is not strong enough. But if we're smart about how we use that, we might be able to play some bigger minions and help our hand advantage a little bit. Shade of Naxxramas is quite annoying, though, because there's so few mass removal cards. About the only thing that ever concerns us is Consecration, Holy Nova, and the ever-present Flame Strike, because everybody plays a mage. I'm going to do something I might regret and take the Farsight. I think it's an interesting card. I don't have a lot of card draw going for me right now, and I think we can combo that into some cool stuff later. So let's try it. I certainly wouldn't take another one if that came up. Here, I'm not interested in Ancestral Healing. Spiteful Smith's not bad, but we are unlikely to have a lot of weapons. We'd like to see a Doomhammer or a Stormforged Axe. But Earthbound Elemental, I think, is too solid. Okay, pick 12. 3 solid, if unspectacular, choices. As of right now, we would have exactly 1 way to activate an Arubian Egg. That's the Defender of Argus. That could change later, hard to say. Sunfury Protector does kind of fit with the fact that we have a lot of minions. It'll cover for our taunt, if we so choose. Right now we have a Sunwalker for taunt, and that's about it. We're hoping to see some of those wolves or the other stuff, you know. Feral Spirit, I think it's called. And Cold Light Oracle is basically like, well, unless we're trying to mill out our opponent, I don't really want to give my opponent 2 cards ever for a 2/2 for 3. So I think we're going Sunfury Protector, because even if you have to play it without giving the Battle Cry any meaning, it's still a 2/3 for 2. Well, I think this is a Haunted Creeper. We are going with a somewhat minion-heavy build. We like the fact that it's annoying to remove because it just sends out more spiders. Priestess of Elune, not great stats for 6, and the health regen. We already have 2 Earthring Farseers. Why in the world would we need that? And the Razorfin Hunter is, I mean, it's the very definition of okay. You're essentially getting 3-4 worth of stats for 3, but on that turn, that 1/1 boar is unlikely to have much impact. So let's take our buddy, the Haunted Creeper. This pick almost always going Fire Elemental. I love those. The 3 damage is so good, especially around turn 6. There's almost always something you can get value for. I don't care about spell damage, even though this deck can run some of it. And Bloodlust, again, I don't like the mana cost for it. Easy pick for me. This is a much more difficult pick. These are all good choices. The Acidic Swamp Ooze comes in a lot of handy. If we run against any other decks that have weapons, you know, the Warriors and the Paladins and whatnot, it's already a 3/2 for 2, and it gets added value if you happen to chunk off a weapon that your opponent was banking on. Harvest Golem, another great 3-drop because of the value you're getting out of its stats and the Death Rattle. And the Stormforged Axe, kind of like the War Axe for the Warrior, is a great play on turn 2. You get 3 uses of it, and it gives you a ton of early game removal, because there's going to be a lot of stuff with 2 health. I want all 3 of these cards. Now, if we're looking big picture, we're about halfway done. Our curve is a tiny bit 3 heavy. It doesn't really matter. That's a range where you're not like, oh my god, I have too many 3s, like you would be if you ran 10 7-mana cards. In my last run, I think I had one of each. I had one of each of all of these. That's part of how I drafted so good. But I got the most value out of the Swampoos. A couple times I got rid of a True Silver or something else that my opponent was banking on, and still had a 3/2 on the board for 2 mana. Oh, man. I want all these cards. Arena, man. What are you going to do? The Stormforged Axe gives a lot of value, though. And it also matches with our double Unbound Elemental. Alright. I've made up my mind. Okay. Don't like these choices, so Haunted Creeper. This is interesting because, I mean, we don't care about Totemic Might. That's needlessly cute for no reason whatsoever. Windspeaker, because you can give it to something immediately and have it attack twice in that turn, can be good. And we do have a lot of minion targets, so that could be interesting. Ironbeak Owl, not great stats for 2, but the Silence could come in handy. We're not going to take any Earth Shocks unless we are facing awful choices, and a Silence at least 1 in this deck could be interesting. So we're going to take that for the utility. This is sort of what we were talking about, the awful choices, but still, I'd rather have a 3rd Earthen Ring Farseer than an Earth Shock. So we're going to take it. This choice not difficult because we like the Flame Tongue Totem. We have a ton of minions that are going to look to exploit it. Reincarnate is interesting because you can trigger Death Rattle effects with it. We don't have a ton of those going for us. I mean, we have the Haunted Creepers, but we're not going to look to play a 2 mana card to get 2 little spiders out. That's nonsense. And Direwolf Alpha is essentially made redundant by the Flame Tongue token, so let's take the Flame Tongue token. Okay. Well, gee, given the choice, Faceless Manipulator is always a pretty solid card. But, I mean, look at the other 2 choices. Awful, because we're not running Murlocs. Awful, because we're not running Pirates. And it's a 3/3 for 3 in both cases. So it's not like it's bad. But let's take the Manipulator, because that can become some interesting things. Our opponent summons a Ragnaros in the arena, we can be like, cool, I also have a Ragnaros. Well, we don't have as many spells as I might like right now. This is the only downside of the draft so far. We have 1 Hex, and we have 1 Lightning Bolt, and then we have that weird draw card, Farsight. Overload 2 on Forked Lightning is so in the early game, though. If you can pull a 2-for-1 out of it and actually kill 2 health minions, maybe. But I think we're just going to go Harvest Golem here because I like it, and I don't think we're going to ever regret playing it. Here we go. A Hex. Thank you, based gods. Frost Shock is meaningless. We already talked about why we don't want the Priestess. Now we have 3 Earthen Ring Farseers, so we're certainly going Fire Elemental. And here's where we're going to have to take stock of how many Overload cards we have. So 1, 2. Just the 2. Yeesh. And again, a 2/4 for 3 is not bad still. You kind of want these 2 to be around. Like the basic rule of thumb is you want 1 of each stat for each mana. So you'd like a 3/3 for 3 mana. This is a 2/4, so it's about the same. Still, though, we're running out of ways to get Overload here. We only have 6 picks left after this. We have a very strange mana curve going on right now. Lots of 2s and 3s, a few high-end things. The Frost Elemental can be somewhat handy in the arena. It does eliminate some threats, or at least give you the turn that you need to ram the Frost Elemental itself into it. I think I'm going to go with a 3rd Unbound and hope to get 1 or 2 more Overload cards to really get some value out of this. I think the goal is just to have 74 3 drops and see what happens. This draft is not going as well as last time, but that's okay. This is an interesting choice. Iron for Grizzly, the very definition of mediocre. And we do have some other ways to get Taunt now. Stormforged Axe, I had to pass up on earlier because I really wanted to go a different direction. No, I took that. Right? Yeah, I took it. But still, a second one does fit the Overload thing that we're looking for. especially with count them, 3 Unbound Elementals. Spectral Knight is nice and difficult to deal with, but I think we're going to go with the Stormforged Axe and just try and dominate the early game. This is going to be a Swamp Ooze because, again, we're looking for early drops at this point with this deck. We have enough big stuff, especially the Fire Elementals, that I'm not really worried about the late game. And the other 2 choices here are terrible, so it's very simple. Gives me a chance to go back on the one I missed earlier. This choice sucks. We might go Bloodlust as a way to make our little minions all of a sudden scary. As kind of a late game threat, a mid to late game kind of thing. Dust Devil's awful. I don't care about the fact that it has Overload. I don't want it. Oh, dear. Oh, my. Well, I think I have to go Fire Elemental because I love them. And because we're looking for a little bit more late game stuff. And I just love his value. He's already practically even on the whole health and attack for mana thing. And the 3 damage, being able to hit that in the face if you need to help close out, or to take out a threat. 3 weapons with 3 durability is a little high, but it still fits with our earlier looking curve. We don't really mind having to trade with the weapon because we have 3 Earthen Ring Farseers, or whatever those things are. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously not Earthshock. So it's just a question of which of these 2. I wish these had been spread out in separate picks, you know? Like, this was this pick and that was the next pick. I would just take them both. I love them. Just looking at my curve. I mean, we have so many 2s and 3s. What's the count on this? It's obviously a ton, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This was probably 10 3s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, I miscounted that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right now we have still only 3 Overload targets. And we're not going to spend a ton of time worried about that specific combo, but if we have 3 Stormforged Axes and 3 3 Unbound Elementals, those 2 cards themselves become the combo. We have to wait till turn 5 to play it then, though. Huh. Let's go for what is the most simple, and that is this. Okay. All 3 of these picks are interesting. The Feral Spirit kind of fits with our Overload theme that we're looking for. It's also very solid. 2 immediate taunters. It's like getting 4/6 worth of attack and health out for 3 mana. The Abomination has some nice utility, and with some other potential picks here, we'd probably take it, but this is a Feral Spirit, almost certainly. And with our final pick, they're like, hey, remember that Ancestral Spirit? You sure you don't want it? I don't really think we have a ton of need to resummon stuff. We could use that for cutesy combos with the Fire Elemental. What other... I mean, we don't have a lot of other battle cries that we really care about. Faceless Manipulator, I guess. Defender of Argus, I guess. Earthen Ring Farseers for the complete waste of time. We do have a lot of battle cry. Or just being able to resummon a big thing like a Sunwalker. That just seems needlessly cute, though. The Mind Control tech is one of those things where you never want to be far enough behind where you're like, oh man, this is going to bail me out. But if you are, it's extremely handy because you get to choose your minion. Oh, it's not you don't. I'm sorry. I went at random. But it's still a 3/3 for 3 at the worst case. That's the worst case scenario. You don't have a target, you're ahead, and you want to play it. That's still a 3/3 for 3. I am kind of intrigued by the Ancestral Spirit. I think we're going to get value out of it. We're not going to see a lot of silence. It's only 2 mana. And between the Fire Elementals and the Sunwalker and some of the other fun combinations, let's try it. It fits with our we're going to play a lot of cards, I guess, even though we don't have a lot of ways to draw them theme. This is a deck. How well it's going to go, we're going to see. It's not as strong as the last deck I had where I got the 8 wins, but it has some utility. We got a second Hex, which I really like. So we're going to give it a shot. If nothing else, it's going to be very annoying when we keep healing ourselves or whatever's going to happen here. So let's see how it goes.